Into this world you came, naked and weak, incapable of grasping the spear or sowing the soil. Yet today you live. Nurtured by your mother's breast, fed by your father's hand, you grew. In the house of your step-parents, you were educated in the ways of the plough and the blade. There you took your stepbrother's cousin for your wife. And now your children strengthen those same bonds of kinship which kept you alive and made you strong. Life may be harsh, and it may be short. Rarely does a man in this land see 40 years pass. Yet life may also be happy. In a realm where the raid is the rule of law, and the deprivations of disease stalk the land like wolves, it is necessary to be true to your people, to keep your community strong and be loyal to your tribe. We need no king to unite us, no pompous nobles oppressing us with laws, for we are bonded together by the ties of kinship, shared blood, and fosterage. We are bound by the need to share, to trade and exchange, to throw up banks and dig ditches to proclaim our mastery of the earth. A man cannot hope to sow the fields, reap the wheat, mine the clay, form the pot, forge the plough, and protect his flocks all at once. He must rely on others to aid him. A strong community breeds strong people, and strong people may defy all that threatens them. Last we left off, Tigernos Baidagnos had just conquered the hill fort of Penacrugon and the Domnonaioi who lived there. Our plans of expansion must continue, for the resources produced by these two tribes still cannot sustain the excessive size of our warrior host. Baidagnos reluctantly increases the tributes demanded from his tribesmen, causing some to challenge the harshness of his rule and his crazed hunger for conflict, departing to join other tribes with less bellicose rulers. Unexpectedly, the tribesmen are not permitted to return home for the light winter. Instead, Baidagnos continues his offensive and strikes out against the nearby tribe of the Orouikes. Unlike the cowardly Domnonians, these warriors are willing to stand and fight. I take a moment to admire the textures of the Tegeslogos unit. Honestly, this mod looks absolutely beautiful, and I personally think its appearance rivals the quality of some AAA titles these days, which tend to skimp out on legitimate quality in favor of flashy, shallow aesthetics. Mediterranean cultures, such as the Greeks and Romans, would reserve the right-hand side of the battle line as the position of honor for their most prestigious warriors. I don't know if the Celts did the same thing, but our nobles deploy on the left, because we're different. Baidagnos reinforces his left flank heavily with cavalry units and a set of chariots, which I have no idea how to use in combat. The enemy surprises the Pritanoi with an early advance, their behavior unexpected when confronted with a force of superior numbers. Quick to adapt, Baidagnos shuffles his melee line backwards slightly, whilst giving the command for his skirmishers to begin throwing javelins at the advancing spearmen. Celts, by their nature, are an impetuous sort, and it isn't long before the younger warriors grow impatient and advance on the enemy, launching their javelins as a precursor to a vicious charge. Meanwhile, the Britannic cavalry circle around the edge of the hostile formation, moving to eradicate the opposing horsemen and give themselves full control of the battlefield. Battle is joined as the two forces crash into one another with the strength of tidal waves and mountains. The Tigernos under Baidagnos smash into the Orouikes spearmen, slaughtering them wholesale with their superior skill and equipment. The younger warriors of the two tribes engage one another, trading like for like, whilst an enemy cavalry unit performs a pathetic charge against the Pritanoi on the far right, achieving little for their efforts. The enemy melts like snow in the spring, their courage harvested like wheat by the inexorable plough of Baidagnos' onslaught. The younger, quicker-footed warriors break into a sprint to chase down the fleeing Orouikes, making sure they never return to the combat. The slower, older men move to aid their valorous chieftain, encircling the enemy spearmen, who continue to resist the Tigernos honor guard. Though the Tigernos are utterly formidable in combat, often slaying 10 foemen for each of their losses, the weight of their superior equipment, as well as the fact they are not as young as they used to be, makes them quick to tire where other tribesmen stay fresh. Baidagnos' work here is done. He orders his men to sit down and recover themselves, and the noblemen recline on the grass and boisterously joke with one another about who killed the most enemies, whilst they watch the rest of the tribe run down the fleeing cowards. Without a garrison to maintain order, recently conquered territories are almost certain to revolt. So I rush Baidagnos and his men back to Penacrugon to keep the Damnonians in check over the winter. In the ancient world, wars were rarely fought in winter, and the exceptions were minimal. Think about how difficult it is to get things done when it's snowing heavily. Now imagine you can't get food in tins, and there's no radiators to keep you warm. Not a good time for the Pritanoi, so they shelter in Penacrugon. Usually, we'd use this time to recruit some warriors, but our treasury is empty. It seems that Baidagnos has gained a reputation for being fearsome in combat, with a hefty bloodlust that makes it somewhat challenging for him to think tactically from a defensive standpoint. Meanwhile, our emissary continues to travel south, and our spy investigates the hostile warband encroaching on our territory from the east. As the snows melt, we return at last to dark summer, the time of war. A family member known as Dorgos comes of age this spring. He joins the Pritanoi warband at Penacrugon, as he must claim the life of an enemy to truly be recognized as a man. 2 bands of Pritanoi are left to garrison the hill fort of Penacrugon. There are no noblemen among them, so the Damnonioi are left largely to their own devices. But they are a passive people, and disinclined to rebellion now that the many households of the 2 tribes are conjoined over the winter. Baidagnos travels south, pillaging the outskirts of Durowernon, but he is wary of being trapped between the hostile warband and the hill fort's garrison. In late summer, young Dorgos begins personally training with one of Baidagnos' retainers. The chieftain lays siege to the hill fort, and this time I make sure to build more battering rams. The province of Kantian. The traveller, woolen cloak wrapped tight around him, brooch fastened firm against the western winds, sits in his watery steed, western zephyrs shouldering the leather sails above him, pushing the boat along the water. Like a multitude of emissaries, the blue jade waves come to meet him, rocking him in his leather-bound cradle atop of the seas. Looking up, past the hand he raises against the rays of the sun to shield his view, he spies a mighty wall before him. Like the white stag, of perfect white, is the wall before him. It is a cliff, it is a border to a new land. It is the coast of Kantian. And so, onto beaches which crackle and shift beneath his feet, he ventures into the land of the Pritanoi, where men dye their bodies blue, women may rule a kingdom, and children grow up with adults with whom they share no blood. Kantian is one gateway into this strange and distant land. Striding onward, a belly full of beer, the spirit of adventure in his heart, the traveller moves onward, onward and upward, through the valleys and hills of southern Kantian, past ponds where curious frogs gaze up through glazed eyes, and deer squint from the edges of the forests. Past proud farms and boisterous locals he wanders, before coming to a great river which divides the land. With one crossing point on its entire length, he tells the locals of his peaceful intentions, and is allowed to wade through the sun-warmed waters. Still north he goes. Behind him, the hills and uplands of the south stare at him with ominous lime eyes, and in front of him opens a landscape which rolls like linen atop the bodies of two lovers. Into northern Kantian he strides, past smouldering heather, over marsh and salt swamp, where the noblemen adorn themselves with mighty talks of gold, where the sea rises above the land and carpets much of it with stagnant brine. This is Kantian, the first gateway to Albion. The time has come to bring war to Kantian and seize it for the Pritanoi. The construction of the hill fort at Durawernon is more or less identical to Penacrugon, the difference in this battle being that the forces of the Pritanoi have several rams with which to launch simultaneous assaults against the settlement's defences. Tigernos splits up his Tegeslogos honor guard, assigning one band of noblemen to lead each of the different attacks and supervise the siege works. One of the very particular virtues of the Pritanoi, in comparison to their neighbours, was the general lack of contention among the elites of their society. Unlike their fractious siblings among the Domnonaioi and the Orouikes, the Pritanoi chieftain was able to trust his lieutenants to pursue the greater good of the tribe. He had faith that, even though he was not there to direct the assault, his comrades would succeed in their attacks against the hill fort. The first gate shatters, and the nobleman in charge orders his band of Tegeslogos to immediately assault the defenders. The ram-bearers and a unit of lesser spearmen are positioned on both flanks of the enemy, so that they are able to rain javelins on the opposition, whilst the noblemen overcome the foe in melee. The other assault forces soon find themselves in similar situations, as the defenders of Durawernon are set upon at all of their flanks, an ox heckled by a pack of wolves. Once again, Baidagnos throws himself recklessly into combat, and his retinue follows suit, desperate to keep their momentous leader alive. His Domnonian allies follow, as Pritanoi pour into the hill fort like a river of death. Meanwhile, at the first breach, the two flanking units expend their javelins and collapse on the enemy, soon causing a loss of courage and a rout. The defenders fighting Baidagnos soon break and run, unable to withstand his ferocity. But elsewhere, one of the attacking groups finds itself bogged down and outnumbered, in need of a flanking maneuver to relieve the pressure. I consider how to achieve this, and decide to make use of the cavalry. When the horsemen smash into the foe, their resolve shatters, and they begin to flee. The Pritanoi take many slaves in the resulting panic, as healthy prisoners have great value in the markets back home. The attackers converge on the center of the hill fort, readying themselves to annihilate the last vestiges of resistance. A brave band of spearmen desperately try to hold off the ferocious Baidagnos and his companions, as the enemy tribe's noblemen are still caught in a quagmire of violence at one of the breaches. Despite their valor, the battle is now clearly a foregone conclusion. It is only a matter of time before the defenders' will to fight breaks, like their shattered spears and shields. The settlement is finally overcome, and the Pritanoi set about gathering up the weapons of the surrendered defenders. They are incorporated into the tribe much like the Domnonii were, though this time many more are taken as slaves back to the west. Our spy, Seneculos, is caught and slain by the marauding warband, leaving the Pritanoi blind as to the movements of their enemies. A grim forebode for the future. Join me in the next episode to see how the Tigernos leads his people through the coming season, and see the fruits of his emissary's mission to the south in the following chapter of At World's End. I'll see you next time.